image of the bridge and the image of Abby on the bridge?
Well, at the time, the only one I saw was the one of Abby on the bridge. So I didn't. I mean, I saw it, so we knew that they were at least on the bridge and, over. So I don't remember what I thought. I just know that, okay, they were there. We need to be searching from there because we know at least they were that far.
And when you called police, how did you call? Was that a 911 call?
No, I called the sheriff's department directly.
It was right around 5 o'clock that evening. One of my detectives sent me a text and said, "Hey, Sheriff, we have 2 girls missing that are, that live in the county. And they were last seen just outside of Delphi near the High Bridge."
Tobe Lesenby wears the sheriff's badge in Carroll County. He's got a shaved head and a powerful mustache.
I honestly was not overly concerned in the beginning because for a number of years, anytime we've had a report of a runaway or even a missing senior citizen, I would venture a guess percentage-wise we've probably found or located those runaways or seniors, I'd say at least 90 to 95% of the time. And so that initial thought entered my mind. I thought, okay, we'll find them. We'll find them and everything will be fine.
The Delphi Fire Department is all volunteers, headed by Chief Daryl Sterrett. He's a rugged man with a strong handshake. And in February of 2017, they were raising money for a brand new firehouse. Chief Sterrett was in a meeting about that when his phone lit up.
I got a text message from my deputy chief and said that they had 2 missing girls and they were wanting to know if we could help search the area. So I deployed people and trucks to different areas. We didn't know where to look in the initial. They were just missing. So kind of deployed people to different areas looking for the girls, driving up and down the streets, checking maybe friends' houses, just putting more boots on the ground and doing what we could. And once the guys got out of the station, I was called to the sheriff's office, and we had set up a joint incident command.
Delphi Mayor Shane Evans was 27 years old in 2017. He's one of America's youngest mayors. And when the search escalated, he was 2 towns over at a city council meeting.
I drove the 25 to 30 minutes up to Delphi. I can't remember. I know I talked to the fire department. I went to the jail, talked to dispatch, some of the county units, some of the city units. At one point, I went out there when the fire department was searching for the girls at that point. Got some equipment available. We have, the wastewater department has, I wouldn't call it a 4-wheeler. It's something bigger than a golf cart and smaller than a gator. So we made that available to county and city units that were working that night if anything came up.
Here's Delphi Fire Chief Daryl Sterrett again.
At this point, we'd started getting a sense of urgency. Now, mind you, now pitch black. We focused on the creek. We focused on roadside. We focused on everything we could with what we had, trying to ping the cell phone. And the information we got was, okay, the cell phone pinged off of this tower. What does that mean? Well, it could be within a 2-mile radius of this tower. And so I said, okay, we need to search all of Delphi, which then includes Deer Creek, the Wabash. 2 miles out is a good ways.
Sheriff Tobe Lesenby.
Of course, that particular day, it was unseasonably warm, but as it drew closer to evening, it began to feel a little cooler that evening, obviously. And so being near a stream, the Deer Creek, the temperature of the water during that time period was obviously cold. We have that rough terrain, so to say, very, very rural part of, even though it's just right outside of the city limits, immediately it turned into a very remote terrain area. Obviously, there's hills and valleys and things like that out there.
In that evening, easily we could have had 100 people searching. And then as you knock on this neighbor's door and say, hey, Well, then they joined the search. And so the entire town was searching in their own way. That's part of being in a small town. Everybody knows everybody, and if you don't know them, you know of them, and everybody wants to help. So we looked, and we looked, and we walked. We were focused on the bridge area, and we had people on four-wheelers. We had farmers in the area. The community was looking. We searched till maybe 11:30, 12 o'clock. And I had met up with the sheriff and discussed with him and Chief Mullins. I said, look, we have blanketed, this area. I honestly feel like we could probably check it off. And he said, well, yeah, I agree, and at some point you have to do that.
As the news of Abby and Libby's disappearance is spreading, concerns are growing.
We got the call from Abby's mom, and then I was texting Kelsey on and off all night.
Erica Gibson is one of Abby and Libby's closest friends, and people confused her and Libby because they looked so much alike. She FaceTimed them the night before.
Everybody was checking different trails in Delphi just to make sure. So we came up here, and we were back there, and we even saw the firefighters back there. And we talked to them for a while, and then they called off the search. And so we went home, but I'm glad we did, because I texted Kelsey right before that. I'm like, hey, I know you guys checked around the bridge, but I know other people have too. Do you need those extra eyes? Kind of glad we didn't. We were two of Libby's best friends. The other person with me was one of Libby's best friends, and I was Abby's. And so I'm kind of glad we didn't.
Cynthia Rossi is another close friend of theirs, and she didn't like where this was heading.
I think when they started mentioning the police bringing in dogs from Chicago, because I know, because from living there, that a lot of bad things happen there, and they always have just certain systems set up if something is to go wrong, and it's a very professional city when it comes to crime and dealing with crime, and they have everything you could ever imagine when it comes to dealing with that sort of thing. So when they said that they were bringing in dogs from Chicago, I was like, oh, they're going to other states. They're contacting people all across the world to try to find them. That isn't a good sign.
Yeah, definitely worried. That night, I knew so, because I went ahead and stayed with my other friend that night. We were going to go to school together in the morning. I was terrified. She wasn't so much. A friend we FaceTimed, was, but, they were only terrified because if they're still out there, they're cold. They're cold, they're scared if one of them's hurt, and really, we just thought they really were just lost and scared.
As it approaches midnight, a controversial decision is made, and for people following the case, it's still being debated.
I've heard good and bad on that comment before. I guess I will say it was a joint decision that I consulted with many emergency response leaders in our community. And so at some point, I guess the way I will put it is the organized effort by emergency services was temporarily called off, yes. But there were still people I know out, even though they were not necessarily under our leadership. I'll put it that way.
Just for people who be wondering why, what was sort of the calculus and the rationale behind that decision?
There's our producer, Dan, who was in Delphi with us.
The search at that point had not been fruitful. The other thing was limited at that time period, limited resources. And when I say basically additional lighting is one thing that came to mind that we didn't have access to, at least, again, at those hours. And so I would, as I recall, I think a lot of it boiled down to availability of resources and being able to continue on.
We were at High Bridge. We had walked High Bridge, and we had walked under High Bridge. I had guys climb down to the top of the pillars of High Bridge. I had guys doing things that they should not have been doing, but we were going to find something. We had scoured the banks of the creek, the hillsides away. You get to a point, that you've walked over it 2 and 3 and 4 times in that area. You kind of feel like you have to put a check mark on it. So we had come to that point, and it's like I said, it was a tough thing to do, but as a volunteer department, you also have to look out for the individuals that you command, because they have jobs, they have livelihoods. That's the tough part of it, because as a chief, you have to be able to look out for them at some point. And they would stay out there until sunup if you told them that's what you were doing. But at some point, you have to be realistic. We have turned every rock we could think of in this area. And that time of year, the ground cover, it isn't now where you've got weeds 4 foot tall. You could see a good ways even in the dark. And we have lights like no others. So we came to that point that we need to check this spot off and then look at maybe coming back fresh in the morning. Let's see what happens.
Abby's mom, Anna, is now starting to worry.
I remember the one moment when Becky had said, Libby's afraid of the dark. She would not choose to be out here if something wasn't wrong. And that kind of hit that, something's up. And just being who the girls were and their friends, they would have stayed together. That was the concern after that, is that they weren't the kids that just didn't, answer their phones and didn't, respond or take off or anything like that. So that was a rough night.
One of the things that was striking to me about our conversation with Anna is what she just said a short bit ago, which was that night, it's dark, there are searchers, the flashlights, everybody's looking, and she remembers Becky saying, Libby's afraid of the dark.
And she wouldn't be out here by choice.
Right. And it was really striking because Libby kind of became a little girl in that moment, but Libby was 14. She's still very young.
I was afraid of the dark as a kid.
Yeah.
So that when Anna said that really touched me, and it really made Libby feel very real to me in that moment. And to think about those girls, they're not out there by choice. And everybody is coming to that realization. And yet the controversial decision is made to call off the official part of the search.
Right.
Because this is an all-volunteer fire crew, and they have full-time jobs.
Right.
If they're not making progress because they don't have the right equipment, they don't have the lights they need, they don't have whatever they need in the moment, they need to go home and sleep.
And we've talked about this a lot. Calling off a search doesn't necessarily mean everybody picked up their stakes and went home. I mean, these guys are volunteer firemen. There's 2 missing kids in a small town. They're not just going to go home.
And some of these people knew the families.
Right.
And so, you had some of them staying, and then you had other people who showed up to help,
right,
who stayed.
So the decision to call off the search, we've talked about it a lot, like how that character, like what that looked like. That may have been a situation where Chief Sterrett was just like, I can't pay overtime.
And it was a bunch of people who made the decision, and it wasn't all on one person. But and there's still stuff going on. Things are still happening out there. But that also gave them a chance to sort of get ready for the next day.
Hey everyone, it's Dan. By now, you're probably getting a sense that we spent a lot of time in Delphi and talked to a lot of people. The great thing about that is that we're able to tell a lot of this story in the voices of the people who lived it. The bad part of that is that we have more than we can actually use. We have about 30 hours of tape that we need to get down into about 8 hours a show. But there's one thing that we didn't want to lose in any of that, and that's getting a sense of who Abby and Libby were. And now and then we want to bring you moments that really bring that out. And here's our first one. This is from Anna Williams, Abby's mom.
The girl behind that big hat and freckles was actually pretty irritated to have to go to yet another wedding and baby shower that year, because there was going to be yet another wedding and baby shower, because that seemed to be our family's routine. But at the same time,